First Peter readers, chapter 5, end of First Peter. It says shepherd the flock, but we're going to put an alternate title to that. Suffer like Christ. You already know where Peter's going with this. I exhort you, elders, so leaders, how should you lead? How should the people taking charge, what should they look like? How should they act? Well, Peter says he is a fellow elder, a witness of, yep, you guessed it, the sufferings of Christ, but as well as both partaker in the glory that is going to be revealed. So, Peter isn't putting just a despondent spin on leadership. However, he says, shepherd the flock of God that is among you. Well, he's of course going to quickly tie that in a couple verses to the chief shepherd. And this whole little section here, right? Be examples to the flock. What does that mean? Well, if you're to shepherd, like the shepherd, then by being an example, what that would mean would be clearly suffering for others. You're a shepherd, you need to lay down your life for the sheep. Well, Peter now turns his attention to the entirety of the people that he's writing to. Clothe yourselves, all of you. So what are you wearing? What do you look like? You go out on the street, what kind of thing do you have on? Humility, which we had already seen was submission. Remember that he had put himself in the position at the beginning of the letter as an exile, a sojourner, a traveler. That is somebody that does not have an established position in society. And then he took that into the household code, putting the servant first, and then the women first. Our whole deal is humility and submission toward one another. He's got this little thing here, the little quote, but it's not a direct quote of anything in the Old Testament. Really, if you were to type this in and then ask for Old Testament quotations into your browser, into Google, you'd probably get upwards of 20 some passages that are like this. It's not an exact quote, because what Peter's doing is almost in a sense quoting the whole Old Testament. This is God's whole deal. He opposes the proud and gives grace to the humble. Well, if that's what Peter learned from the whole Old Testament, and of course from the chief shepherd, then humble yourselves under the mighty hand of God, casting all your anxieties on him. Well, Peter well knows that it's not always enjoyable to suffer. Well, it's probably not ever enjoyable to suffer, but he cares for you. Well, if you're moving into suffering, be sober-minded, be watchful, maintain the mindset. Maintain the mindset that Christianity involves suffering for other people. And when that happens, it doesn't necessarily mean you've done anything wrong or that God is displeased with you. Your adversary, the devil, prowls around like a roaring lion seeking someone to devour. Okay, we can actually make this a little more specific. Devours who? Devours what kind of people? The proud, who think they should not be suffering. Because look what he says next. Resist the devil. So this isn't just a general resist him, be strong, be faithful, be courageous, be a man, be a woman. No. Resist him more specific than that. Firm in your faith, knowing that the same kinds of suffering are being experienced by your brotherhood throughout the world. So, how do you resist the devil? You say to yourself, suffer. I am not going to be like a proud person who thinks they should not be suffering. See, sometimes when we resist the devil, if we take this verse out of context of Peter, we actually interpret it to mean the exact opposite. I'm going to resist the devil. I'm going to be strong. I'm not going to let myself be brought down. I'm not going to let myself suffer. I'm not going to engage with that negative person anymore. That person's now become my enemy. I'm going to stand tall, chin up, no cross for me. We got to be careful with that. Peter is saying, in this context here, that the way you resist the devil is by saying, part of my existence is that I do suffer. And Because that is a difficult concept to maintain in your mind, I must be sober minded all the time. I must be ever watchful. But I know that the Lord cares for me even in the midst of suffering. Now, look, he hits it again. After you have suffered a little while. So, what does he mean by this? Well, a little while in Peter's terminology is his life. Well, what is he doing? He's comparing life uh, to eternity. Okay? So, yeah, life counts as a little while because eternity's forever. Because God in Christ will restore, confirm, strengthen, and establish us. To him be the dominion forever and ever. That is, our hope is in waiting for him. Our hope is not in avoiding suffering. That's not what we're trying to do. We're trying to serve him at all costs and let him take care of the rest. Now, as we finish this chapter, again, another heading here, final greetings. Let's add to that final greetings from a fellow exile and traveler. Peter says, "She who is at Babylon, who is likewise chosen, sends you greetings." She, meaning the church where Peter is at, where he is writing. She who is at Babylon. Now, in the Old Testament, the Jews who were in Babylon were exiles. They had been deported there after Jerusalem had been destroyed. They were in exile, they were exiles, so they had no rights. They were in a position of constant suffering and submission. They lived in Babylon. But despite that, despite the fact that they were exiles, sojourners, travelers, that they didn't have status or position, they were chosen people of God. And the Jews did not forget that. They knew that something bad had happened and that they were suffering for it, but they also knew, on the other hand, you know what? I am still chosen. I am still of God. I will not let that suffering cause a creeping doubt to be in my mind that, well, if God really loved me, right? If God loved, then that would equal no suffering. hmm The Jews didn't let that happen. They suffered tremendously, and yet they still said, chosen. Now, Peter's not actually in Babylon, he's in Rome. And he calls Rome Babylon because remember earlier he had started to call the church to be part of the people of Israel, right? They were priests, they were a people. And he kept hitting this over and over and over because what happens to an exile is eventually you think, well, I am no one. I don't have any position of authority. I don't have a people group. I'm not part of anyone. I'm an exile. I have no one. Well, Peter is trying to, again, and he did it earlier in the letter, we have to do it too. He's trying to hold in hand two things at all times. He's trying to hold exile, which normally means you're not chosen and you deserve your suffering, and the fact that you suffer as a chosen one. Now, normally, if you're chosen, you would think, well, I shouldn't be suffering. Peter's keeping both of these things in hand at all times, which is difficult for us. So he says, those who are in Babylon, who are likewise chosen, send you greetings, you people, fellow exiles and travelers. Peace to all who are in Christ. Greet one another with a kiss of love. 1 Peter chapter 5. Hope you enjoyed the study. Take care.